Hey, everybody. Once upon a time, there was a Wednesday. And in this Wednesday, there were witches. Witches who talked about movies. Witches who talked about fairy tales. And today, yes, today is that Wednesday. Welcome to the Witches Movie Coven. Grab your goat, grab your wand, grab something to drink because we are here. Welcome to the Witches Movie Coven. Yay! I am Patti Negri. I am one of your hosts, and I'm honored to be here. You might know me from The Witching Hour, my regular podcast, or from Ghost Adventures or lots of other television shows. But this is one of my favorite hours of the week here on Wednesday at the Witches Movie Coven. Let me introduce you to my co-host. Let's start with the beautiful Heather Greene.
Hi, I am Heather Greene. I am the author of Lights, Camera, Witchcraft, which is a critical history of witches and witchcraft in American film and television. I am also not in Atlanta. I am actually in Minnesota working at the offices of Llewellyn, where I'm an editor, an acquisitions editor, and I'm getting ready to see Jason starting tomorrow for the great yearly conference Paganicon, which goes from Thursday, really Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, where I will be doing a puppet workshop and also a haunted doll workshop. So that's what I'm doing, and that's who I am.
Beautiful. Thank you, Courtney.
Oh, that's me. I'm Courtney Buckley, ghost bait on Scared and Alone, and filled with relief that that Heather's clown is not peering at me from around the corner. So
wait, I got something better. Hold on.
No.
You said that. Now you're in trouble.
No. Courtney.
I don't know. What I do this to myself. Listen, I was curious what you.
Oh no,
Annabelle.
Oh, boy.
Clarabelle. Let's not give her the name Annabelle now.
Great.
This is Clarabelle. She came. So she's going to stare at you. You can't see her, but she is staring at you.
I feel it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Beautiful. And Jason.
I am mild Jason. I will also be going to Paganicon. This book comes out in May. I'm very excited about it. I will be talking about Raymond Buckland this weekend. And I have no haunted dolls to share, which I think is a blessing in my life.
We can remedy that.
Thank you. And you'll be at Paganicon as well. So anybody in wherever area you guys are. And now you may think Richard Leal looks slightly different today because he is out and having fun somewhere in the Bay Area. So instead, we brought along one of our absolute favorite fill-in guests, the one and only Thumper. Take it over, Thumper.
Hello, I am Thumper Forge. I am a witch and an author with Llewellyn. I wrote the upcoming book, The Chaos Apple, Magic and Discordianism for the Postmodern Witch, and I co-authored Virgo Witch, and I am a practicing devotee of Jason Mankey.
Ooh.
Many degrees, I'm sure.
Wow. Wow.
I normally make, whenever I'm on and Jason's not, I make fun of him, and so now that he's here, I have to pivot.
I love it. It's good. We like to pivot here on the show. I want to say before we go on, we'll talk about all the stuff coming on later, but Heather just showed me the first print copy of my upcoming doll book. Speaking of haunted dolls, it's the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Yay. I can't wait. It is so cute. It is so cute. And
it is. It's great size. It's really good for holding. It's got all the stuff. First time I've seen it in its form, so it's very adorable.
It is very adorable. Exactly what a haunted doll and puppet book should be. So, all right, this week's movie, Snow White, the original 1937 version. I hope you guys all watched it. We here on the panel have watched it. I just watched it. But just in case you didn't watch it, since we don't have Richard Leal, I must say the beautiful, beautiful Courtney Buckley is going to channel Richard Leal and give us an unbiased synopsis.
All right. I don't want to hype myself up too much, but I tried to do my best and make Richard Leal proud. So here we go. Once upon a time, a queen talks to a mirror who tells her she's not good enough because men. He says Snow White, a literal child, is the fairest of them all, and the queen flies into a rage, rightfully so. Enter Snow White, singing into a well for no reason, acoustics, I guess. Suddenly, the prince pops up out of nowhere and sings into the well next to her like a weird stalker, despite the fact that he is wearing all of his red flags as a cape, which we'll touch on later. Somehow she's now in love with him after meeting him for 4 seconds. And then we move on to the queen, who is now plotting her revenge against Snow White for being more beautiful as a literal child. She hires the huntsman. She tells him to go kill Snow White and bring her Snow's heart in a box. So the huntsman goes out to do just that. Then he realizes immediately that he has a conscience, and he tells Snow White to run away. She runs away. She runs through the woods. It's very dark. There's scary logs that she screams about. There's bats that she screams about. There's scary trees that she screams about. I'm pretty sure she's hallucinating, but that's just my opinion. She spins around a lot and then suddenly falls to the forest floor, where she cries to the bunnies and the woodland creatures all night long, which in turn scares them. And as soon as it's daylight, she immediately apologizes, and then she sings a song, which fixes everything. She has a cottage in the woods, which she takes over while insulting the state of it, and coerces woodland creatures into hard labor to clean it to her liking, even though it's not hers. The dwarves now are working in the mines, singing a song, and they come home after a long day in the mines to beds that woodland creatures have been sleeping in, which is disgusting. So for someone who is so concerned about cleanliness, obviously suddenly we're not anymore. She tries to kill Sneezy by leaving flowers, which he's allergic to. She scares them by looking at the monster in their beds, which is terrible. The dwarves end up loving her because, I don't know, it's a trauma bond, and taking a bath for her, which I don't think they've ever done before in their lives. The queen, we're back to the queen now, decides to revert to a hag, specifically my truest form, because this is who I am every day of my life. Meanwhile, the dwarves are yodeling and playing instruments with their butt cheeks. The witch then poisons the apple and becomes just an absolute icon. The dwarves warn Snow White as they're going off to work to be careful about the queen, which she immediately disregards everything that they say and has zero sense of stranger danger, while also making Grumpy a pie with bird feet stamping on it because he finally likes her. I don't know. She just wants everybody's affirmation and attention. It's ridiculous. But then immediately after they go to work, the witch pops up in the window, asks her if she's alone, and she says yes, which is crazy. The birds attack the witch, and Snow White shames the birds and apologizes to the witch as if she wasn't just warned approximately 7 times. The witch talks about apples. She offers her an apple and says it's a magic wishing apple, which Snow falls for immediately, even though it is the equivalent of free candy from a windowless van. The woodland creatures flock to tell the dwarves that something's wrong. The dwarves return home to discover that Snow White has experienced the consequences of her own actions. The dwarves ride deer into battle. They corner the witch. She tries to hoist a boulder onto them and gets struck by lightning and falls. Vultures begin to circle. She is now the deadest of them all. The dwarves have a wake for her and are seemingly so in love with her, like necrophiles, they stare at her dead body every day. And then the prince comes back, who she's met one time for 4 seconds because he sang with his head in a well. He removes his red flag cape to display his red flag behavior, also like a necrophile, kisses Snow White like a freak, and Snow is revived by not true love's kiss, in my opinion, but the well's good acoustics kiss, because that's all they have going for them. The woodland creatures are pleased. The dwarves dance. Snow White now has her prince, so she immediately abandons the dwarves and woodland creatures who stay there and moves to the castle. Everyone lives happily ever after, except for the true hero of the story, who is now vulture food. The end.
Beautiful, Richard Leah.
Will you please just follow me around and summarize things?
Yes, absolutely.
That name is Courtney. That's one name, not two. That was bravo. That was bravo.
Thank you.
That was beautiful. So now we actually know everything you could ever need to know, but maybe, just maybe, there are 5 more things or more, because it is a Disney movie, for Heather, who is an expert on such things.
Well, yeah, this would be really hard for me to narrow down to 5. A lot of movies are like that, but this one in particular, because this was where I did my thesis work and masters, and have been a long time Disney animation fan. But I do have some 5 things, but I'm going to do this a little differently. So yeah, number 1 is our basics. Let's just go over Disney basics. So this was a 1937 film. Walt Disney Company, it cost $1.5 million, which was outrageously expensive for a film at that time. It eventually grossed $8 million, which is $174 million in this today's money. It eventually won the following year an Oscar, a special Oscar, because animation wasn't getting Oscars. It was given to Disney by Shirley Temple. It was 1 big Oscar and 7 little ones. There's a picture of them standing on the stage, if you can see that. It was a special Oscar, and the music was up for an award as well as the best score, so a musical score. So it did not win, but it did. And yes, there are the list of songs right there at the bottom, and I can attest that I can sing every single one of them by heart. Another little quick basic note, what's one of the cool things that I always remember is that the actress that did Snow White was a soprano. So they weren't looking specifically for actors and actresses. They brought in someone who can sing, because at the time Disney was music really fueled a lot of what Disney was doing with their animation. At the time, their famous Silly Symphonies were done right before this, which were fueled again by music. So the next thing I just want to mention, another quick thing, this is number 2. Disney was really into innovative ways of telling these stories. That's why he got into animation in the first place. And one of the things this film used was the multiplane camera, which is a really cool new invention and not been used before, where they were able to film an animation movie or an animation sequence where it actually looked like there was depth. So it didn't just look like a painting, a flat surface. You actually looks like there's depth within the actual frame. And this was done by something he invented called the multiplane, or I don't know if he actually invented it, but the Disney folks invented and used for the first time, along with, of course, and this was not the first Technicolor animated film. That was actually considered to be the short Wizard of Oz film that was done at the beginning of the 30s, which I've mentioned before. But this was technically an advanced film. So all hand on animation. I'm going to point that out. Now, let me go a little bit off script here. I am going to tell you the story that led up to the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and the reception. And then I'm going to do a little bit of a feminist thing, but maybe I'll save that for later. Who knows? But the story of animation. So this was not technically the first animated feature film. There was one called Little Nemo in 1911, but feature films in 1911 were very, very different than feature films in 1920s and 30s. So technically, yeah, this is the first animated feature film in that respect. Animation was around since the beginning of film, but really got the industry really picked up speed. It really started to congeal and become more popular in the 20s. Really, our animation as we knew it, when you started to get things like Felix the Cat and Betty Boop and stuff like that, the characters and the stories were becoming more regular in the 20s. They were becoming more and more popular. They were being paired with movies. This is when Disney got his start. Of course, the very first Disney one that everyone talks about is Steamboat Willie, 1929. And really, it started to pick up steam into the 30s. People really enjoyed going to the movies to see a movie, to see a feature, to see a cartoon, and a newsreel and various other things. This is part of the program. Nobody expected that anyone could do a feature-length animated film, except Disney. There's Steamboat Willie. That's the beginning of Mickey, of course. And at that point, sometime in the early 30s, I can't remember when it was, the exact date, he decided he wanted to do the full-length feature. I can do it. And I actually have an article he wrote in I can't remember, what is it from, 1938. So it was after the film was released. He talked about how why he started to want to do this film, why he came up with the idea. And he loved Snow White. He wanted to try. So what he did was pick a property that was well known. And in the film industry and television industry, whenever changes are made, whenever you want to attract more ticket holders to your new technology because you're losing tickets, whatever it was, people always turn to beloved tales, to stories they already know, because viewers will come watch a story they know. I love that story. I'm going to go watch it. I don't care if it's animated. I don't care with the new technology. Oh, we need to get people back to the cinema. Let's do stories people know. This is a trend. He was doing that. He picked a story and he writes in his article, I picked it because everybody knows it across the world. I want to pick something people will know. They know the story. They love the story. They'll come to the theater to see it, even if it's animated. He also noted that it would be fun to do this because prior to this in Silly Symphonies, they were doing a lot of things with music and little birds. And there was, I think he says, Courtney, just for you, there were a lot of, where is it? We're going to have a lot of fun with the dwarves, and there's plenty of opportunity to use small birds and animals, which have always been popular with our fans. So he actually makes that note. So it gave him leeway to move with the stuff that he was already doing, things people were used to, as well as a story people were new, to do this new innovative challenge, to do a full-length animated feature. And he did it. He also went to the PCA, which is the Production Code Administration, to make sure that what they were doing wasn't going to violate. They weren't going to spend all this money and all this time drawing and all this stuff, and them getting rejected, not being able to do it. So they went before finishing, before the beginning, they said, hey, this is what we're doing. And I have the letter. Could you please look at this and tell us? Because if we're going to do all this work and then you reject it right before we're going to release it, which happened, we don't want to bother. Tell us what we can do to make sure that doesn't happen. And it turns out the PCA thought they were a champion of moral, what was the word? I don't know if I see. I can't find it. Anyway, they were, I wrote it down, but they were a model of American morals and ethics, Disney, the Disney company. And PCA was pleased and was like, yes, absolutely, go for it. So they did. And what happened? It was a huge success, massive success, so much so that Hollywood began scrambling for another property that would be as successful. What are we going to do? And Patti, do you know what movie that led to? Jason does. What movie did that lead to?
The Wizard of Oz.
That's right. MGM bought Wizard of Oz in reaction to this. In fact, there were articles at the time says, will MGM still steal Disney's magic? Quote. But we all know, because you've all read my book and also have listened to me about Wizard of Oz, MGM did not steal Disney's magic. Despite the success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, they did not follow suit with another princess witch movie right away. They did Pinocchio in 40, they did Fantasia in 41, Dumbo in 41, I also believe. Bambi was 42, and then they had a bunch of other ones, Three Calabaros and whatever, and they realized those were films, even though it was the wartime, were not doing as well. So in 1950, they went back to Cinderella, made a boodle. They just did really well with that and said, oh, this is the formula. Started Sleeping Beauty, which turned out to be a giant bomb, and stopped with princess movies until The Little Mermaid in 1989, and it's all history. I don't have to go on from there. So this started it all. And the witch in this movie, the witch, the formula, everything, this is what created Disney's formula. This is what created something that was a legacy that has been handed down, and they still really can't get away from fully. You can see that with some of the more modern films, even Princess, I was going to say Princess and the Pop Star. Oh my goodness, that's a Barbie movie. Don't even go there. The Frog Prince movie, Tangled, any of the earlier princess movies, you can still see the legacy of this one, and I can talk about that more later. So that's the story. That's number 3 and number 4, because I needed to deviate to tell that story because I think it's really interesting, and there's so many things to talk about. In my book, I get into the witch herself, and I could talk about this forever, and I'm not going to. But the witch, Courtney, I urge you to find these pages on my book. I see you doing this because I really talk about the subversive readings behind her and all the various things. And I get really into feminist film theory. But the thing that's interesting about this is witches prior to this are not connected to beauty and sexuality. Witches, whether they're crones or whatever, they're not connected to a power of their own. This is the first American movie to connect a woman's interest in her own power, independent of men, a woman's interest in her beauty, a woman's interest in a display of sexuality because she is gorgeous and she is sexual, to magic and power, to witchcraft. This is the first movie to do that. And that is fascinating since that really was not supposed to be. The production code specifically says, do not make evil alluring. Disney is the first one to do it, which this is a child's film. So it's very interesting. This is the first true vamp witch. And what's fascinating is that she was, back then, all the animators were men. And this was what my thesis was on in grad school. All the animators were men. They were supposed to make the most beautiful woman in the world, Snow White. They were supposed to and designed the most beautiful, alluring witch. She was actually the notes she is supposed to be from the production stuff. Sinister, mature, with plenty of curves. That was the description from the production notes. Lovely, lovely, cruel mouth. Dozens of photos of that mouth. They had pictures up. These were all men that were doing this, presumably heterosexual, from the notes and from the stories, that were creating the epitome of female beauty for young girls to look at. And so if you want to dive into that, you can read my thesis, because that's my thesis, is how that's affected. But this is a very interesting display of witchcraft in the first time we see it, where witchcraft is connected to female beauty and female sexuality purposefully. The first vamp witch, and it's done by Disney. C'est tout.
That is absolutely beautiful. Yes, and I'm going to go reread your book in that section on witches. If anybody doesn't have that book, check it out right there. Thumper's got it. It's fabulous. It's big.
It's I will find the pages and I will put them in the chat if you want to read specifically.
That would be great. So anyway, this movie, animated movie. Anybody want to go first? Okay, I'll go first. Nobody jumps in, because I always just get stuck on one little area, which has rarely anything to do with what you guys talk about. I'm the person who has never seen Bambi or Old Yeller or anything that has cruelty to animals, especially, or cruelty in general. If this being the epithet of moral whatever, not if you're a turtle. All I could say, not if you are a turtle. My heart broke for that little turtle trying to get up the stairs. Everybody passes him by. Nobody helps him. Trying to get down the stairs. He falls down the stairs. He's always late to the party, never gets invited. It's amazing he's alive at all. If he wasn't animated, he would be a dead turtle somewhere. She makes all those little critters wash dishes and clean. And I was, as much as, I enjoy the fairy tale, I enjoy the animation, I had to hide my eyes more than I had to do with a slideshow.
That is vile that you would put that up in front of her while she's reminiscing about that poor
it's
turtle.
Context. We need context. That's the turtle.
Beautiful. Look at that happy little turtle. That happy little turtle who was bounced down flights of stairs over cliffs and dales. So honestly, just like when Courtney has her issues, it's hard to get past. That was hard. It was very, very violent. Enough said. Moving on.
I miss hand-drawn animation so much. There's a beauty in this film that you do not see in the computer-animated, computer-generated stuff. Like the way the cloaks move is so gorgeous. You can feel how soft that dress that the evil stepmother queen / witch, she has so many jobs, is wearing. The colors are so much more vibrant in hand-drawn animation. I forget how much I love watching these early Disney movies because they never quite recaptured this magic that they had over the first, maybe 4 or 5 movies. I think Heather would know, because the animation got cheaper in the 60s and really changed. Such a beautiful movie.
And then in the early 60s, for 101 Dalmatians, they started using Xerox to help with the duplication. But it really wasn't until, I think, Beauty and the Beast. No, I think they might have used some digital animation in the 80s, but it really was Beauty and the Beast was the big one. But there was some done periodically later. But yeah, the hand-drawn wasn't completely gone until
But you can see, though, like if you watch Robin Hood, for instance, that the backgrounds are not nearly as lush. That there's cost cutting in these movies. There's no cost cutting in Snow White. It's every frame is absolute perfection and beauty. And we've cut.
You're muted.
You're muted, Patti.
Sorry,
it was beautiful pontificating, though. It was.
But why are the rats evil? I mean, I love rats. Rats are evil, and vultures are evil. All the bunnies are good. I'm out. Okay.
Not all bunnies are good. In fact, I didn't have a Snow White T-shirt, but I wore my one Disney T-shirt.
Amazing.
It's my zombie Jackalope Thumper shirt.
Oh.
So we can have an evil bunny.
Yeah, and there's that book, Bunnicula. Was he bad? I can't remember, but
he was misunderstood.
There we go. I love that.
He sucked the chlorophyll out of vegetables, right?
He did.
What he did? Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot to add to the movie because it has honestly been a long time since I've seen it. But in doing some reading on it before tonight, there's a theory that from Snow White's perspective, the witch's magic apple worked because it was the wishing apple. And, if she took a bite, she would get her true love. And from Snow White's perspective, she takes a bite of the apple, face plants, and comes to with the man of her dreams kissing her. So Snow White has a very different take on what happened to her than everybody else does.
But I've never thought of it like that. That's wild.
Yeah.
Be careful what you wish for. You never know how magic's going to play out, right?
Which is kind of what apples always end up representing. And this is a theory of mine that I'm sure countless people have written dissertations on. But whenever an apple shows up in mythology or in fairy tales or what have you, it always represents a choice. And whoever is being presented with the apple is inevitably going to make the wrong one. The apple always represents the bad choice. And it's like you have half of the woodland creatures trying to get Snow White not to do something, and she did it anyway. But there's always the option of not taking the bite of the apple or not claiming the apple for the fairest or whatever it is. But inevitably, the apple always wins.
And the Wizard of Oz movie that shall not be named uses the apple in the same way that you're talking about exactly. Oz the Great and Powerful, when Eleonora, when Theodora is super angry that Oz has rejected her romantically, and she goes into a fit of rage and of jealousy, Eleonora says, "You can live without feeling. Here, bite the apple."
Ooh.
She bites the apple, becomes the Wicked Witch of the West.
Ooh. I need to make a note of that.
It's a really bad backstory. We try not to talk about this, but it always seems to come up in my world because it's Oz related. But it's definitely they borrow that. You also see, I think, the apples in The Witch. Isn't it? I think they recall and it's been a while, where the young boy has a Snow White type of story going on. If I remember correctly, I think there was an apple there. So, yeah, I think that's an interesting theory to look at.
Absolutely.
There's also an apple on the cover of Twilight.
Really?
Really?
Edward's hands are holding an apple.
Mhm.
Yep. I now
And
like
then- and then in
apples
the
a little bit
movie-
less.
Right.
Well-
Shut your mouth, Jason. But apples, in the movie, to pay homage to the cover of the book, he comes into the cafeteria and like the apple falls and he kicks it up into his hands and catches it like this. And like, yep, there it is.
Interesting.
Because I always find a way to make it about Twilight.
I think this is definitely a biblical concept. We're looking at a story that's older than all of these stories, basically. But can I just jump in? Someone pointed out in the comments that Snow White, this story is a German tale from the Grimm brothers. Yes, it is. I didn't bring that up because I was doing the other stuff. But yes, it is a Grimm brothers story. And what's really interesting in the Grimm brothers story and a lot of renditions of Snow White is that the queen is usually not magical. She uses a magic thing. Like in the original story, I believe she uses a comb that has magic, but she's never called a witch other than talking about a comb that's been done magic by a witch or whatever. And even when the original story, when she becomes the old woman, she uses, I think they call it makeup, or I have to look at my notes of what exactly it said, but she covers her face with something. She doesn't actually use witchcraft. And a lot of the stories, including the 1916 one, the later the Three Stooges one, a lot of these, and even some of the other ones and more the newer ones, the witch and the queen are two separate characters. So this is one of the few where you actually have the Wicked Queen and the witch the same. Again, turning back to what I said earlier, it was the first one where magic and femininity and sexuality are pinned together. That is not always the case. So look at other Snow White films and you'll see that's different.
Do some of them actually have separate characters as the Queen and the Witch?
Say that again?
Do some of the other versions of the story have literally two separate characters of the Queen and the Witch? Really?
Yep, I think it's a Three Stooges one where the witch is actually a magician, is a sorcerer, is a man. And that is typical for the 60s, for the early 60s. And the witch in the 1916 version is called Witch Hex, which is different from the Evil Queen. So yeah, and I can't remember the newer ones. I've seen all of the Snow White and the Huntsman and Snow White Tale of Terror. I can't remember if those are separate, but some of them are too. Yes.
Okay.
Just like the original tale, they're separate.
And while the Brothers Grimm version is the most famous of the versions, which is German, there are versions of Snow White in places like China, Italy, throughout Europe. Scotland has its own version of Snow White. This is a very universal tale that transcends a lot of cultures. But because of the popularity of the Grimm brothers, those are the versions of fairy tales that we know the most.
Interesting.
You know what's funny? I'm learning a lot about myself as we talk about this because I'm now remembering that I did not have like Disney princess books when I was growing up. I had Grimm fairy tale books, and that makes a lot of sense for who I am as a person today. But I really want to talk about the witch for a second because I did not know any of the. Yes, that's my favorite ever image of all time. I use it as a GIF constantly in text messages because that is who I am. Like I literally envision myself as that going down into my little hatch, like with my eyeballs peering out. Whenever her eyeballs are peering around, it's so funny. And I'm like fascinated by everything that you just shared, Heather, with like I knew none of that other than like reading your book. Like that part is brand new to me, and watching it tonight and pairing that together is amazing. But like this is the first movie. Like we watch all these witch movies and I see other witches like Practical Magic and I wish I was like them or they inspire me to like want to be, whatever. This is a movie that I watch and I'm like, that's me. That's already me because she's so crazy, but so funny and cool. Look at her eyeballs again. I can't literally, yes. Courtney popping out of people's faces, literally. Okay. And she's just, but in addition to that, it's like, she is told by a man that she's not good enough. So she's like, well, science, I'm going to fix this. And she makes her potions, like witchcraft, whatever. She finds a thing. She turns into the hag. And then she's like, aha, let me double check this. Let me fact check my work and double check that there's not an antidote for it. And then she goes and she looks it up. Like, so she's smart and she's doing like all the steps. And she's just an icon. She is an icon. And then she's so pleased with herself that she's running around her cave cackling and like saying all the things. And I just love that for her. Honestly, she just went for what she wanted, and she's just beautiful. She's almost more beautiful as the hag than she was as the queen. And that's my hot take. I love her.
She really did start kind of create the archetype of the Disney villain who is infinitely cooler than the Disney hero.
Yes.
Well, and she's the model for Maleficent, and she is
Yeah.
the model for Ursula.
Yeah. Those were exactly
So-
the first two characters that popped into my head. And
On
Scar
purpose.
randomly, who, when we think of the Lion King, Scar was a lot more fun than all of the good guys.
And there is a way in a lot of these movies, she was designed to be like Marlene Dietrich and Joan Crawford and the femme fatales and the powerful women that were being displayed, especially in the deadly woman that was often in silent films. She's meant to be that woman, alluring and dangerous. And women, these movies always end up telling us how to behave as women, because she ends up going over a cliff, because all Disney doesn't kill its villains directly. If they're women, they usually throw them off cliffs. A lot of Disney villains die by falling off things, including Scar. And,
I was like, now that you mentioned that, wow.
Mufasa.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a common thing, but yeah, it's what was I saying? So, but a lot of these movies, even though they kind of end the story with telling women to be such and such, if you can't be this or it's too dangerous, but they give you a chance, like Courtney keeps saying, where you can imagine yourself in that place. And to have Disney present a female character that's so independent of all things and so strong in what she wants. Okay, granted, she wants to kill a kid. Okay, let's just put that aside for a second.
I mean, okay, and
I love this movie. I love Disney animation. If you cannot tell, I spent my entire life loving Disney. I spent my entire master's degree work on one or another Disney movies. My thesis was on Disney animation, the princess movies. I worked on other ones as well because I'm obsessed with this. And I'm obsessed with the concept that people are sitting there in a room drawing these characters. It all is coming out of their head, everything, every last thing. It's just a piece of art come to life in storytelling mode. And I'm fascinated by it and how that works. And so I love this movie with all its flaws and all this stuff. And I agree with Jason. There's nothing like hand-drawn animation from the creation. And this movie is unique in its way. Cinderella's more less artistic because this movie was modeled after Silly Symphonies. This movie was much more modeled to pair with music, whereas they got away from that and more into what you would say is a Broadway-esque, where you have storytelling music. This one, the music and everything flows together, and that was the way animation was at the time.
So I think today we take for granted how easy it is to see these movies. And I'm curious, Heather, when did you first see this movie and how did you see this movie?
That's a really good question. So I'm guessing, I don't know, because I grew up going to Disneyland as a child and with parents that were really into Disney. I don't ever remember a time not having seen this movie. So it probably was either, and we got HBO pretty early in the 70s. So it was either on HBO, or it was had to be on television or maybe the movie theater. They were coming back.
There was a period in the 80s where Disney movies were kind of going on tour. And like Fantasia came back, and a few others were suddenly in theaters for a very limited run.
I had to have seen this early on in the 70s because I saw when I was very young, and it had to be before Disney started releasing. It had to be before VHS. It had to have been in the theater or on television.
Can I just hop in for 1 second, Thumper? You just gave me the world's biggest validation because I saw my first movie in the movie theater was Bambi, and I could not figure out how I saw Bambi in the theater when it came out. I was like 2 or 3 or whatever, like very young, and that was in the 80s, and I could not figure out how I saw it in the movie theater, and I didn't know that, and that is exactly how I saw it. And I in the theater, I stood up and I screamed that Bambi's mother was dead, in case anybody missed it.
How did you see it, Jason and Patti?
I saw it in, I think, the 2nd or 3rd grade. It was our school Christmas musical, and you could rent Disney films and pay to show them to kids. And it was a film. It wasn't a VCR tape. And they played that in the back for the kids while we were waiting to go on stage.
Wow.
So I was sitting on the ground in East Peoria, Illinois, watching Snow White for the first time. And I remember like, oh, you're a boy, like princess movie. How stupid. And then you start watching that movie and it is more than a princess movie, right? I was angry when I had to go on stage and do the singing because I wanted to get back to the movie. But that's how I saw it. And I saw a lot of Disney movies in the theater. I saw Bambi in the theater, and I saw Robin Hood in the theater. And my grandmother almost took me to a showing of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in the theater until my father pointed out in the newspaper advertisement that was the pornographic version of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which would have been really problematic for me growing up, I think, if I had seen that film.
Wow. I don't remember where I saw it, but it's probably the reason because that animal thing for me, I can't probably why I never saw Bambi or Old Yellow or anything else, because my heart broke for the turtle. I started collecting turtles. I don't know where they've lost it, but I have a whole collection of turtles. So it hurt me early on.
I highly recommend you avoid Bambi. I highly
don't do it. Don't do it.
I will not see it. But I love the animation. I love the music. I love the music. I too could sing every song there, Heather, and I'm ready to start whenever you are. My mom, we sang. My mom could sing. I just sang. I couldn't. But we watch it like this. So I don't know where that was, but it affected me in not a good way.
I would like to share something very bold and brave. Since we keep bringing up Robin Hood, the first crush that I ever experienced in my life was on the fox in Robin Hood.
Oh,
Courtney,
for sure.
Only you and literally every gay man I have ever met in my entire life.
Like, that was my sexual awakening, was the fox in Robin Hood.
Hey, Maid Marian the fox was hot too.
Right.
I mean,
that's when I learned I was not straight.
She was a fox. I mean, yeah.
Well, Courtney, you validated me as well because I, like you, was not raised with Disney movies. I was raised with big books of Grimm and Anderson fairy tales. So it was weird for me to, like, when The Little Mermaid came out, it was this huge deal because, this new Disney animation for the first time in decades. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be a horror movie. Because I remember what happened to the mermaid in the story, and it didn't end well. And her transformation was not like a cool dream sequence. And, they didn't just take her voice. And so it was weird for me to watch that and be like, I'm rethinking Disney's takes on these. I feel like Disney is kind of tossing these underhanded.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I was just gonna say I don't have a remembrance of when I saw Snow White. I was not super into the princess movies. Like Robin Hood was my jam, but then I used to like the movie White Fang. I used to every time we'd go to the video store that I would ask for the White Fang. And there was like movies like The Land Before Time. Like those were my big ones growing up. I didn't get into princess movies until I was almost an adult, and then I started loving them. So I know I saw Snow White as a kid, but it was never, and it still isn't really my favorite, but like there, and I haven't seen it in probably since Nathan was tiny, but like I love The Witch now, especially, and I she has stuck with me for all these years.
I'm obsessed with the messaging gone awry in these movies, and I'm thinking specifically of Maleficent and this, like that code of, oh, powerful woman, this is what happens if you're too powerful. You turn into a giant dragon that destroys everything. And I'm like, that is not a bad thing.
Right. That's what we want.
And so it's sending, I know what message they were trying to send, but yeah.
And that is being corrected, and we're going to be watching, I think the 21st is when the full release of the new Snow White. So I'm curious to see if they try to do anything new with it to try, because that's what we've been seeing happening. If you think about Maleficent, the live action Maleficent it gave her a backstory and told us, yeah, we don't like what she did, but we know why she did it now. Yeah. And so, I'll be curious to see how they present Snow White, but Disney also is responsible for Oz the Great and Powerful, the most misogynistic Wizard of Oz display ever. So yeah, I got 2 shots in there this show. So I don't know what they're going to do with that, and I'm eager to see. I'm sure I'll be posting angrily or happily about it. I do love some of the cast in it, but we'll see. But this one is what started it all for Disney. Whether you like it or not, whether it's watchable or not, it's what started everything. So it's the formula that made the Little Mermaid. They finally, after years of missteps and movies that just weren't meeting the moment of the changing times, like someone mentioned Black Cauldron, what a disaster. It was the second biggest failure behind maybe it was the biggest. I'd have to look at the numbers behind Sleeping Beauty, the original animated film. But there was just one after another because they could not get in touch with the changing culture. And it was just one after another of Don Bluth left on purpose to make great the American Fievel, the American Tale, and some of the other ones. And you had one of my favorites.
Secret of Nim. That's
Secret
the
of Nim, one of my favorites. I love
Secret of Nim.
There's your rap movie, Patti. There's your good rap movie. I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good rap.
But yeah, so it was years, and they had to have a shakeup at the corporate level, and then they finally got it together and went back to the old formula and went to Little Mermaid, and it was this huge success using the same formula, modeling Ursula after the Wicked Queen, although she was also modeled after a drag queen as well, making her as even more fabulous.
Wow. Are you telling me, Heather, that The Great Mouse Detective is not a good film?
I love that movie.
That's 1986.
Yeah, it's not.
And the Rescuers? The Rescuers?
And the Rescuers Down Under?
RESCUE.
Joanna?
Rescuers Society. Not the Rescuers Down Under. The original.
Yeah. Oh. We don't talk about that. There was no sequel to The Rescuers.
Yes, there was.
No.
Yes, there was.
No,
yes, there was.
Uh-oh, hexing is coming.
That's it. Everyone was safe, and now it's too late. Goodbye, Jason.
You probably think there's some sort of movie with Sinbad as a genie, too. They
I saw it!
No, they don't exist.
Hexing is afoot. On that note, let's go back to Snow White. Do we have any quotes, Miss Courtney?
Oh, yes, of course.
I'm wishing.
No, I don't have a lot of them because I was also writing the other thing. But one of the things I did want to bring up is that one of the quotes in this movie is one of the most misquoted lines of all time, which is, people think it's mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? And it's actually magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? So some quote trivia for you. Also, I thought especially Heather and I would relate to this one. When Snow White is over her crying spell and she's apologizing to the animals, and she's like, her whole life is falling apart. Someone just tried to kill her. And she's like, what do you do when things go wrong? Oh, you sing a song. And I was like, right, that's what we do.
Yeah, pretty much.
So true. That's so true.
And that's true because nothing makes me feel as good as when I'm in a mood as like driving around and blasting music and scream singing, because it's just what I do. And then the rest of mine are quotes from The Witch, because obviously I liked the part of her spell when she says, when she breaks the tender peel to taste the apple in my hand, her breath will still, her blood congeal, then I'll be fairest in the land. And I was like, get her. Okay, go for it.
Poor kid.
Then
Wild
Poor
endangerment.
right, do it. I support this fully. Then just one more reason why I am the witch and she is me. She does all her her research and finds out that love's first kiss is the antidote. And her response to that is, love's first kiss? Bah! No fear of that. And I was like, well, I relate. Yes. Okay. Then she's so thrilled with herself that she's done this, that she launches herself down the stairs while cackling. It's like a 5-minute cackle. Like it was like that time that we got stuck on live cackling and it was like 30 minutes long. It was like that, but in Snow White. And then she comes down the stairs and there's a skeleton in a jail cell reaching out, like it died, reaching out for a jug of water, and she laughs at the skeleton and she says, thirsty, have a drink, and then kicks the water jug and a spider comes out. I was like, you know that she left that person there to die and then rot into a skeleton with the jug. She's torturing people with the jug in front of it. I was like, this is queen behavior, queen witch behavior. I'm living, me and all of my bones appreciate this. Then I'm going to go back to it's a magic wishing apple. I had to write it down both in my synopsis and my quotes because I was so appalled that being told it was a magic wishing apple made all of the thought leave Snow White's brain. And then her last dying words, I'm trapped. What will I do? The meddling little fools. I'll fix you. I'll crush your bones. And then she fell to her death. And I thought that was pretty iconic. So I'm obsessed with her and I love her and she's everything. And that's why all my quotes surround her.
So pretty frightening.
Thank
I
you.
didn't realize that Mirror Mirror was misquoted.
Yep.
There was an occult shop in New York in like the 80s and early 90s called Mirror Mirror.
Mm-hmm. There's a movie Mirror Mirror. And it's like one of my favorite quote trivias is that it's that one and it's Luke, I am your father is not the line. It's no, I am your father.
Yeah.
You're going to need a bigger boat. People say we're going to need a bigger boat. It's you're going to need a bigger boat. So there's a lot of very fun misquoted lines, and that's one of them.
Our quote expert, Miss Courtney. Thank you.
Huzzah!
So now, as time marches by, we move to the amazing Jason Mankey. Do we have
I'm so excited.
a movie moment, perhaps?
We kind of do. So I need to tell you all something about my family's history. My great-great-grandfather, Chet Warren Mankey, used to work at Disney back in the day. He wasn't an animator or anything, and so his name's not on any like credits or whatever. He was a janitor, but he and Walt were also pretty close because Walt would ask Grandpa Chet about projects to get what Walt called the common man's view. So Grandpa Chet was privy to a lot of insider information, the kind of stuff scholars like Heather Greene can only dream about. So I have a lot of Grandpa Chet's things, and I went through them because he used to pick up discarded drawings and notes for historical purposes. And I learned a lot about this movie. And these are things that you don't know. There were almost a couple of other dwarves, and Grandpa Chet's notes talk about them. So we all know Doc, Grumpy, Happy, Sneezy, Bashful, Sleepy, and Dopey. But I want to talk about the ones that almost made the final cut. So when the movie was being screened for Disney staffers, there was a lot of worry that Snow White was too pagan and that it might be kind of satanic. There were magical creatures, princesses who could basically talk to animals, people practicing necromancy, magical potions, talking mirrors. It was too much for a lot of people. And to counter that, Walt Disney came up with the character of Preachy. Preachy would lecture the other dwarves about the Bible, talk about the horrors of witchcraft, and how women like Snow White were the creators of original sin and couldn't be trusted. He also told the rest of the dwarves that they should have dominion over the animals of the forest and the bodies of women. At test screenings, audiences told Walt that Preachy was a real downer and not fun at all. One person in the test audience said, "It was like listening to my weird Uncle Zebediah at Thanksgiving dinner." Preachy was eventually replaced by Grumpy, who wasn't much happier, but he was less, preachy. So Walt always thought a lot about the marketing that would accompany his movies, and he thought that one of the dwarfs should be the cool one. So instead of Sneezy, we nearly got Poochie, who was going to be voiced by Bing Crosby. Instead of singing along with the rest of the dwarves, Poochie was going to do a lot of jazz scat singing. In the only scene Bing recorded, he can be heard scat singing these lyrics. "Do-da-dee, what dop daddy-o, just skeet bop a do bop a bop peep, snowy, 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 blowy, 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 that's my only hickey, licky, slicky, get on my Ricky." Again, thankfully, test audiences came to the rescue and advised Walt against adding this particular dwarf. Eventually, it was decided to just jettison Poochie altogether and send him back to his home planet. Heather, of course, has already talked about how expensive this movie was to make, and Walt Disney came really close to putting a little product placement in the movie to help defray some of the costs. And thanks to an agreement with Pall Mall cigarettes, we nearly had the character of Smokey. Test footage with Smokey was recorded, and while the dwarves were singing, Smokey would blow smoke rings for the animals and the rest of the dwarfs to jump through. Another scene that was cut from the film had Snow White emptying Smokey's ashtray at the dwarf's cottage. While picking up the ashtray, Snow White says, "Oh, a Pall Mall smoker. He must be a real man." And in the end... Thank you. In the end, the actor who played Smokey coughed way too much during production, and Disney abandoned the Pall Mall sponsorship, and Walt took out a second mortgage on his house instead to finance the film. So there you go. 3 dwarfs we almost got, but thankfully didn't. Thank you, great-great-grandpa Chet, for preserving this timeless behind-the-scenes info.
Yay!
You are about ready to be hexed by Heather, Jason.
Yeah.
No, that's okay. I thought you were going with something that was a little bit less G-rated because those are actually truly behind the scenes stuff that nobody talks about.
Hey, thanks to great grandpa Chet, he has a lot of stuff that I can share going forward. I mean,
please bring the stuff to Piganicon so I can look through it and make photocopies and add it to my treasury. How about that, Jason?
Sadly, I'm leaving in just a few hours and I'm already packed, but next time, Heather. Next time.
It's the way awesome. You had me, the way you had me believing that for like the first minute. And I was
down for Preachy. I was like, I can totally see this. I'm gonna go find a Preachy t-shirt to wear next time.
My favorite one was Smokey. That wow, that's just
what a real man.
That's not
real. All right, time is ticking. Grab your wands, everybody, and I mean you guys in the chat room too. Wands up, wands down.
I don't know what's up and down with this. What's up with a pen? That's up. Up. Nobody's responding in the chat. I'm concerned.
Come on, chat room. We need to know. Wands up, wands down.
Okay.
This. Thank you, Liz. Mine is trying to be up, but the turtle keeps falling down. But it's up. This looks kind of nasty, doesn't it?
Well, that's a different dwarf, Patty.
We'll talk about that one next week. So anyway, it looks like now they're neutral.
They're coming in.
Plastic, Alicia. We got up, we got wands and horns up. Here we go. It must have been stuck in the inner space somewhere. So, it's pretty much a wands up film. And if any of you haven't seen it, I'm sure you're going to be rushing.
Except our one neutral. Whoa.
One neutral.
Yeah, Alicia, God.
It's a classic. So speaking of movies, what's our movie next week? Do we know?
Clash of the Titans.
The original or the new one?
The original.
There's only one Clash of the Titans, Thumper.
This was Jason's choice, so he can be blamed next week or hexed or whatever needs to happen.
I'm giving it ones up now.
Boom. So excited.
Thumper's giving it a wands up.
Okay, well, we did it. We survived. I didn't even see very mild lights out on this. So thank you guys. Come back, tell your friends. It is 7 o'clock, but anybody have anything exciting they want to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
Nope.
Let's just cackle.
Let's just tackle one. Like a wicked, wicked witch. Courtney, lead us. 1,
Yeah.
2, 3.
Just to be